Welcome to EVONA Origin Stories, the space podcast where we look to bring you extraordinary leaders from within the sector and their fascinating stories of early life, career, and how they broke into the space industry.
Our guest on the podcast today is Sassie Duggleby, co-founder and CEO of Venus Aerospace. While she originally studied biomedical engineering at university with dreams of going to medical school, Sassie now has a rich background in engineering, an MBA and years of experience in 4 different technical startups, all with very diverse backgrounds. Sassie and her husband decided to launch Venus Aerospace after moving to Japan from Texas. They realised that while most new space companies are focusing on reaching the stars, much more could be done to innovate travel here on Earth using the same technologies. Sassie is also a passionate advocate of empowering women in STEM and works as a mentor to inspire change in the industry. She's an incredible spokesperson for the key message of this podcast, and we're really excited to be speaking with her today.
Sassie, hi, how are you?
Hey, Rich, I'm great. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm good. Great to finally meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Sorry, it's been a little bit back and forth, a little crazy.
That's okay, no worries. First of all, thanks ever so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on our show today. I really appreciate it. I know how hectic things are and how busy life is at Venus at the moment. First, I just want to say congratulations on your Stargazer unveil last month. Video was incredible.
Thanks. It's been an incredible journey so far. So
amazing. Excellent. Well, again, thanks for taking the time to come on the show today. It'd be great just to kind of get right into it, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It'd be amazing if you could, I guess, kick us off with talking to our listeners about the early days of Sassie Duggleby. Talk us through where you started in life, grew up, school, college, and eventually sort of how you found your way into your early career at, I think it was National Instruments and Lunar Innovations.
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in Plano, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas. And, went out, literally lived my parents still live in the same house that I moved into in kindergarten. So, super fortunate there. Graduated from Plano Senior High, which was a really large high school. I think my graduating class was almost 1,400, just a really large school. Ended up going to Texas A&M for my undergraduate. And my degree was biomedical engineering because I was intending on going to medical school. And so I thought, well, if I decide at the end not to go to medical school, at least I have an engineering degree to fall back on, as opposed to, a biology degree or a chemistry degree. What do you do with a career there? Not that there's anything wrong with those, but I knew engineering. I liked the math and sciences. And so as I was actually getting close to graduation, I started talking. If you were a doctor, I was kind of harassing you. I was like, hey, I'm thinking about med school. What do you think? And I'm not kidding. Like 10 out of 10 doctors said, don't do it.
Really?
Yeah, it was, so I graduated college in 2001. And so at that point, every doctor was like, insurance is changing healthcare. If it was practicing medicine to practice medicine, then it would be great, but the entire industry is changing and wouldn't recommend it. And so ultimately decided, hey, maybe I shouldn't go to med school. What else would I want to do? And National Instruments, I ran into at the Texas A&M Career Fair. I was just walking around with my resume, doing the standard undergrad thing and seeing what opportunities were out there. And the great thing about National Instruments is if you had an engineering degree, they didn't really care if it was electrical or computer or biomedical or mechanical. They figured if you have a degree in leadership experience, they can train you and teach you on what you need to know. So ended up joining NI right out. Actually, I traveled for a year as a consultant for my sorority. That's a whole different story. I'd been president of my sorority during college and then spent a year traveling the country. And then my husband, Andrew, and I met at A&M, and he's my co-founder with me. And he had one more year of school yet and so left. And so he finished school. I traveled for Delta Gamma and then started at National Instruments in their engineering leadership program, which was a great place to start the career. You kind of learned applications engineering, answered phone calls. I actually feel like my Google search abilities, like I can find anything on Google, and it's because I literally started my career answering phone calls from engineers who were like, hey, I'm having problems with this and this and this. And I'm like, at the time, I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And how quickly can I Google and figure it out and then answer the question? So it was a fantastic career start. I spent a couple of years there. And then in the end, Andrew, my husband, was getting his master's at UT, University of Texas. And called me one day at work and was like, hey, my advisor at UT got department head at Virginia Tech. what do you think about moving to Virginia? I just got a free ride offer for my PhD. And I said, can I talk about this when we get home? And so got home, ended up going out and visiting and realizing it was a great opportunity. And so while we were out there, it was kind of, fortunately, one of the professors that was kind of recruiting Andrew asked me, so she said, well, what are you going to do while you're out here? And I said, I don't know yet. And she said, well, I would recommend you use Blacksburg for what it's good for, which is graduate school. And so then I went back and forth of, do I go get my MBA? Because at National Instruments, I had moved kind of into the marketing group and realized I really enjoyed the business side of technical companies. Or do I go get my master's in biomedical engineering or master's in something else? So I ended up deciding to get my MBA and actually focused on entrepreneurship after taking I took an entrepreneurship class and just absolutely fell in love with it. I love building business plans and taking an idea and trying to build it to, scale it up. So we stayed in Blacksburg for a little bit. I finished my MBA. Andrew still had some time left on his PhD. So I joined a pretty small startup out there called Luna Innovations, which was a fiber optic test company. So it actually was a perfect combination of my test experience from National Instruments and then my MBA, and worked there for a couple of years. And then we moved to College Station, Texas. Andrew got a professor position at Texas A&M. And so ended up, when you move to College Station, it's also another small college town. So it's not the plethora of tech startups. So I actually started volunteering at the local business incubator. We got out there and, I kind of said, here's my background, and so I was just spending time helping startups or, spin outs of the university or professors who had ideas, but they didn't have any idea how to actually create a business. And so I was helping them with their business plans and helping put things together, and got to meet a lot of folks in town. And one of the startups that I had been helping out there was called Phage Biocontrol. It was a microbiology company. And I was helping the founder, Neil, a lot. And he was like, hey, I've got to go on this trip. I'm going to miss this pitch. Would you like to pitch for me? And so I said, sure, I'll go to this pitch competition. And he said, well, if you're going to pitch for me, you might as well join the team. And so I got brought on as literally employee one at this biotech startup. And kind of helped grow that to a couple $1 million in revenue. Spent, I don't know, 4 or 5 years there. I should probably look back at my resume exactly, but it's been a couple of years and we grew it. Unfortunately, the technology, we were actually trying to use bacteriophage, which are bacterial viruses, to treat corrosion in pipelines. And the technology ended up just being far too specific and didn't end up working out. They were able to spin it into kind of a lifestyle mom and pop business. And at that point, Andrew, who was a professor, had also started a company with one of his former students. And they kept saying, hey, why don't you come help us? And I'm like, no, you don't work with your husband. That's like business 101. And they kept saying, no, please come help. Then, the opportunity came. There was just the right time for me to leave Phage Biocontrol / Equalize. It had a name change, and go out and help Andrew and his business partner they had a steel manufacturing company building propane trailers and vacuum trailers, to haul hazardous materials up and down the highway. So I joined Andrew and the Exocent team and realized, oh my gosh, we work fantastic together. I have my skill set, he has his skill set. And we realized we're really good partners when it comes both to marriage and to business. And so kind of grew that and had an opportunity to exit there. And that became well, what do we want to do when I grow up? On Andrew's side, and he had been a professor at A&M, was running the business, and decided he really wanted to get into space. So this whole time, I've not spent any time in space. Andrew's been the space nerd, loves Star Trek, loves space. And ultimately we moved out to Southern California. He got a job at Virgin Orbit. And I actually at the time decided to stay home with the kids. We had 2 girls. Our daughters at the time were 3 and 6. And I thought, they're only going to be little once. And so I stayed home with them, and then we ended up deploying to Japan. So Andrew's in the Navy Reserves. Yeah. And 2018 was just a really bad year for the Navy. There was a bunch of wrecks, some shipwrecks, and so ended up deploying to Japan, and that was really the origin of the idea for Venus. So it was living in Japan. We pulled our kids out of school. I was quote unquote homeschooling the kids by really just traveling all over the country. And so Andrew was working at the shipyard, took a leave of absence from Virgin Orbit. And I was, homeschooling and traveling all over the country. And I was sitting out on the balcony in Japan, kind of looking over the Pacific Fleet and kind of recognizing, I think there was an event, I think it was my grandmother's birthday was going to be happening while we were in Japan.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I couldn't get back to Texas for that birthday party. It was that it's 13 hours. What do you do with the kids? You're dealing with jet lag. And it was that realization that, man, the world is giant. It is a large place. And here we're working at Virgin Orbit, spending time thinking about how do we use rockets and get things into space. And it was like, there's some new technology that's coming down the pipe. There's a new type of rocket engine. And it was that realization that I think we could take this rocket engine and actually put it on a vehicle that could get us back home in an hour. And so that was really the genesis of the idea of Venus Aerospace. Was living in Japan, realizing the world's big and you've got this rocket technology. We're sending things to space constantly, but I can't even get back home.
Yeah.
So got back to Southern California after the deployment, and Andrew actually came home. I think he'd been back at work a couple of weeks and came back from a trip to Mojave and said, hey, I think about a job for you. And I'd been wanting to get back into the workforce. Our kids were fully in school. And I was like, really? And he said, yeah, Virgin Orbit's desperate for LabVIEW programmers. And someone at Virgin Orbit found out, you worked at National Instruments, LabVIEW, and you want a job. I was like, yeah, sure. So I went in and interviewed and ended up getting hired into the launch software team to write LabVIEW code for Virgin Orbit, which was really fun, a fun challenge. I had not programmed LabVIEW in, I think, 15 years. So you want to talk about a kind of chip on my shoulder?
Yeah.
It's like, I've got to a couple things. It was like for stay-at-home moms, women that had left the workforce, but are super skilled to be able to get back into the workforce and prove that you can still do this. I just felt like I was carrying a huge monster chip on my shoulder. And fortunately, had a team that supported me and people that believed, yes, you can do this. And so I spent about 6 months coding and then ran over to the business development group. And, I love software developers, but, this team was very much, headsets on, code all day, not talking. Introverted. I'm a pretty social person. And so I ran over to the business development group and started chatting with them and said, here's my background. I've been writing launch software for the last 6 months. I've got an MBA. This is, my resume. Do you guys need any help? And they were like, oh, absolutely. So I kind of got the best of both worlds because the launch software team didn't want to give me up. So I switched to where I had like 50% of my time writing code and 50% of my time supporting business development and mission management. And that's where I really learned the aerospace industry. I mean, I couldn't even have told you that rockets were 2-stage. There was so much in terms of space that I just had no idea, and just got to get inundated and work with absolutely incredible people and learn all about small sat launch. And so we stayed at Virgin Orbit until we got the demo launch finished in June of 2020. So the engine that Venus had the idea for developing it's called the rotating detonation engine. And we knew that's the engine that kind of changes everything. And in 2019, Purdue proved the engine. So we knew we wanted to go commercialize it. And so dug in and figured out how do you incorporate, how do you raise venture capital. And as soon as we got Virgin Orbit through that very first launch, we put in our resignation. And Andrew and I kind of grabbed hands as a husband-wife founding team and said, all right, let's go do this. And we knew we had about 9 months of savings. And so we said, all right, we've got 9 months, those kids like to eat every day. So it's like, all right, we can feed them for this long. We think we have something here. Let's go try to raise money. And it took us about 6 months of fundraising to really get the final capital close, the seed round, which was led by Prime Movers Lab in January of 2021. So we quit our jobs June 2020, middle of a pandemic. I think the actual day we quit was the middle of the race riots. We kind of laughed. This is the perfect time to quit your job, right? So that was kind of the genesis of.
What a story. Do you know what? I love it because a part of this, and we'll talk about this more as the show goes on, but the main sort of ethos behind this show is to make space accessible for everybody. So people that are even thinking about it, or maybe it doesn't have to always be engineers or software developers, people in sales, marketing, whatever it is, that are kind of looking outward into space and think that's too far afield, that's beyond my reach, I can never get into space. And then hearing a story like that, kind of like biotech, and then like getting into space, and it's amazing. And also one thing that's really, really interesting finding, I think you are 15th or 16th guest, and the people that I've been speaking to that can merge engineering with entrepreneurship are like phenomenal high performance people. You don't see it very often because, like you mentioned, you speak to engineers, not to tar every engineer with the introvert brush, but you tend to find they're not very customer facing, they're not salesy, business development, you get one or the other. But when you can find people that can merge the two, it's incredible things happen. And I was going to ask as well, I mean, you kind of answered it already, how is it finding a company with your husband? Because it's one of those things where it's like, don't bring work home and don't talk about work. But actually, when it's something you're incredibly passionate about, you probably never want to stop talking about it. You probably don't get bored of talking about it.
Yeah, no, we kind of joke. So we walk the dog in the morning. We have a Labradoodle, and that's like the beginning of our work day almost. Like we almost always start talking strategy like 7:30 in the morning, take the dog on the walk. And then at the end of the day, when we come home, we walk the dog, and we try to make sure by the like if we're still talking business, we like walk the dog a little more. It's like, okay, we need to shut this down because, we are very passionate about life balance, and, our kids, I think they kind of get sick of Venus sometimes. They're like, man, mom and dad, will you quit talking about this? But for us, it's the most incredible journey of a lifetime. And we had this crazy idea and kind of grabbed hands and jumped off and said, let's go see if we can do this. And so it's hard to not talk about it because we love it, but we do try to find that balance of, like, let's make sure we take vacations. Let's make sure we do fun things with the kids. Like, we're passionate about getting to soccer games and swim team practices and
that's amazing.
All the things like that. Because, at the end of the day, when we're done with this, it's at least a 10-year journey. I mean, our 10 and 13-year-olds are going to be 20 and 23, and they're not going to be in the house anymore. Like, we're never, ever going to get that time back. And so, we really try to keep things in perspective of, yes, Venus is important and what we're building is important, but I don't know. I feel like at the end of people's life, you never hear someone, 85, 90 say, oh, I wish I had, not spent time with my kids when they were little. And so we try to keep that at the tip of mind.
That's made me feel a lot better because I literally had that type of situation today of my 7-year-old. It was her sports day today at elementary school, and the last 2 years haven't happened because of COVID. Sports day haven't. That's just the first time I'm actually going to see her at sports day in her elementary school since she left nursery, basically. And I had that exact same moment. I had meetings back to back in the morning. I was like, I should just move this because it's the first time in like 3 years. I'm not, like you just said, I'm not going to get this time back again. She's only a kid once, and it's the best thing I did. I just moved things around, and I just took half the morning and just went and watched her at sports day for a couple of hours, and it was the best thing I could have done.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and we're passionate about that with our team too. Like, we tell them, like, our company vision's home for dinner, so we want to be able to fly you to one side of the world and have you home for dinner. Yeah, and if you work for us, we want you home for dinner. And I know that's not always the standard in the space industry, which honestly, I think that's why, when I was at Virgin Orbit, I was the oldest female engineer for a bit, and I was like 38.
Yeah.
You look around, there's a plethora of 25-year-old female engineers, but by the time you get to almost 40, they weren't there, and just made me think, what's going on that with the industry that, and I don't know that that's the norm in all cases, but I definitely think I think women in aerospace tends to be, I think, the worst industry of all industries, like statistically. Yeah. And so we're trying to, build a culture that's different in terms of we truly want you home for dinner. Like, we want to be able to test rocket engines, fly drones, fly planes. And that was actually part of our move to Houston. So we were living in Southern California with Virgin Orbit and moved the company to Houston because it hit that home for dinner vision where we're no longer a two-place location. Like in Southern California, we were doing our engineering in Long Beach and all the operations out of Mojave, and Andrew was head of launch operations, and I was pretty much a single mom for a couple of years because he was always out in Mojave and I was in Long Beach, and it just wasn't sustainable. So
yeah, no, with the same. I mean, when we started 4 years ago, one of the things that myself and a few other co-founders were really passionate about was that work-life balance, and we're kind of like, we're kicking ourselves a little bit now that we haven't kind of spoken about it or like marketed that as like a tool for attracting talent, essentially, because we've been doing it for 4 years before the pandemic happened. So our entire workforce is 100% remote working, 100% flexibility, there's no start or end times and unlimited holiday. And
wow.
but then the pandemic happened, and then the world turned upside down, and then people slowly started coming back to work. And then like loads of companies like, oh, we give flexible working as if it's kind of like a benefit, but we never saw that as like a benefit. That's just something we felt that should just happen. Like
Yeah.
companies should be able to give that. So yeah, I completely agree. And what you just touched on there is actually what I wanted to speak to you about. It's one of the hot topics, not just in space now, but I think across STEM and STEAM as an industry, is the diversity. Unfortunately, the stats still are not where they need to be at all. I went to a DEI meeting at the GEO in Colorado with Maxar and Lockheed and those guys a couple of months ago, and we were all kind of speaking about it all morning. It was some really, really good ideas, but I'd be keen to hear yours on, I guess, being a female engineer and a leader within the sector. What are your kind of thoughts on diversity in space, and what do you feel we should be doing differently across the industry and at kind of STEM level to try and impact change now and for future generations?
Yeah, I think about this problem a lot, and unfortunately, I don't feel like I have great answers. I do think some of it comes back to the very beginning messaging you send your kids in elementary school and middle school, and in terms of like, fortunately, I never, I obviously was strong in math and science, like to be an engineer, and so I never felt that wasn't a possibility. But I think trying to encourage younger girls to get into STEM is, it's got to start somewhere. But then I also think it comes down to even how you teach, how you like. I know I think back to early in my career, and even there was confidence issues despite having great grades, done great in school. I'll be honest, I joined National Instruments and like kind of questioned, like, do I have the right to be here? Am I okay here? And I felt like the guys around me all like, oh, they know all this stuff about all of these things. And I don't know that they knew anymore, but they handled it. Their confidence came across very differently. And so sometimes I think it's just an instinctual female confidence issue, that you start doubting yourselves. And so I would encourage any female out there, like whether you want to go into engineering, whether you want to go into entrepreneurship, know that you can do it. Like you are fully capable. And so, I've actually had some discussions with, professors. A friend of a friend is a professor in physics, and she's actually done a lot of research on gender differences and how females tend to learn and how males tend to learn. And the standard engineering curriculum actually teaches more to the natural ability of how a male learns. And so it's like, what are we doing at engineering education in the curriculum in terms of, how do females actually learn? I think there's some change that could be made. I don't know that the ABET, the engineering organizations that have to be ABET accredited, like at the end of the day, having watched Andrew as a professor, mechanical engineering professor, and what he's graded on, the problem is too that the massive universities, they're not there. Like at the end of the day, they make their money off research dollars. Like, yes, they're there to educate the students, but that's not what the professors are graded on. And so, sure, they have movements to empower women and, get more diverse students in the engineering curriculum, that kind of thing. But I don't know at the end of the day, in terms of how education actually happens, that there's any difference or there's any movement there, because it is just a professor that's, researching fluid mechanics that's, going to teach this introduction to fluids class. And so he's not looking at, he or she is not necessarily looking at like, what's the best way to help, my students learn and retain information. So I think there's a disconnect there between what the universities are graded on and what they're trying to do versus, how could we really impact equality within STEM companies. So
I think I think we need to probably look at going younger as well. We a part of our kind of mission as well at EVONA is new starters that we hire. A part of their onboarding is they have to enroll on what we call the STEM Ambassador program here in the UK, which basically means that they then need to become registered STEM ambassador, which means they need to do between about 2 and 3 STEM events over a 12-month period. So that's either them participating, ideally hosting one, where they're basically educating younger kids, ideally at elementary or secondary school, on STEM, ideally within space. And actually our marketing team looked at this a few months ago and looked at all the stats and all that kind of stuff. And we were doing things in like university and college. Actually, we're thinking this is like it's too late at that stage. I think it needs to be at a much younger age, and making it, the main thing for me is just making it relatable, actually making it relatable to that age group, and making it basically accessible for everyone.
Yeah. Well, and I'll be honest, like, I don't know that when I was in high school or middle school that I truly even understood what an engineer did.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until it was some outreach program from the University of North Texas or University of Texas at Dallas came to my high school and showed what is engineering video? And it was this kind of just a promotional video on engineering in the physics class. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that's what engineers do. I love math and science. I could be an engineer. And so I actually always wonder, like, where would my career have gone if, that outreach hadn't happened into the high school to say, hey, here's what an engineer does. You could go do this. So, I'm very thankful for that young woman that came into my physics class and talked about what an engineer is.
Yeah.
So
amazing. And that I think it stems back to what you said earlier about the whole self-esteem thing around, at that age, and around things like that, and failures and achievements. I think, and this is probably relatable as well, I guess my kids, as they get older, it's inevitable, but with various social media platforms, I think people always see the kind of like the highlight reel of successes and achievements, and they don't always see the hard work and the grind and all the sacrifice that sort of lead up to that success or that point. So over your career or life, what would you consider so far your biggest failure or lesson learned, and what did you learn from that? And on the other side of that fence, what would you consider your biggest achievement so far career to date?
Well, I think on the achievement side, that's easy. I mean, starting Venus and, building it to where we are right now, we have about 55 employees, and, been venture backed by some of the world's best deep tech venture groups. It's been the most incredible ride of a lifetime. In terms of failure, I wouldn't change where I am I think because of all the failures and the things that have happened in different parts of my career, I wouldn't trade it, because all the failures are actually ultimately what leads to where you are today, right? It makes it easier.
Yeah.
I definitely looked back on my early career, and I felt like I just thought if I just do a good job and just do my job, that's good enough. And I missed out on lots of networking and lots of, I don't know that I promoted myself well.
Yeah.
And so I think my early days, I just assumed just do the work and that's good enough to get noticed. And I think because that's what happens in school, you get good grades, I was involved with leadership stuff. And so, I just always kind of got the recognition and the things that I needed to do. And so, when I first started at National Instruments, you have to do a long training program, and then you ultimately move. And I kept staying in the same entry position and not moving as quickly as some of my peers. And I couldn't figure out what was happening. Well, it turned out they were all off having discussions with the people and the groups they wanted to move into. It's like, oh, I'd like to come join your group, and here's why. And I was not having any of those conversations. I was not letting people know what my career aspirations were, where I wanted to go. And so I think I spent, several months. It wasn't a long thing, but I ultimately stayed in my entry level role longer because I had never told anybody, hey, this is what I want to do with my career. And so was it a failure? No, but it's, maybe, but it was absolutely lessons learned. And so I always tell people all the time, go talk to the person that's in a seat that you think you want to be in the future. Don't be afraid to reach out to anybody that's within your organization, because at the end of the day, people like to mentor and give advice. And so I think I did that really poorly earlier in my career. And now I'll be honest, sitting here in the CEO role, I mean, I've never been CEO before. We're learning as we go.
Yeah.
I've found, I can reach out to other CEOs, other founders, other women and men that have raised Series A or Series B or Series C, and kind of learn some lessons that'll help keep us from tripping up as we move forward. And typically those people, when I reach out and say, hey, would you be willing to chat? Usually the answer is yes. So.
Yeah, do you know what? That's one thing about when I think about what I love most about being. I mean, I've only been in the space sector for the last sort of 4 years, is how incredibly welcoming everybody is, and like willing to help. Exactly what you said. Like, when you ask people and you approach people for help, like they're always willing to give you the support. So yeah, absolutely. And I actually did want to touch on as well. Would it be okay? Could you just tell our listeners all about Venus Aerospace, what you guys do, what your mission is, how you fit into the aerospace sector, and also where you see the company being over the next 5 years?
Sure. Yeah, so Venus Aerospace, our goal is to build a Mach 9 space plane capable of 1 hour global travel. So San Francisco to Tokyo in 1 hour. You would take off from an airport with normal jet engines, then get up to altitude away from the city center where you can actually make noise, because rockets tend to be just a wee bit noisy. And that's actually where you'll turn your rocket booster on. And so, it's considered a boost glide system. So you boost up for about 10 minutes to 170,000 feet, where you'll be traveling Mach 9, and then you become a glider. And so you'll be able to see the curvature of the Earth. The sky will go from blue to black. You'll see all the stars. And you'll just be traveling at Mach 9, bleeding off speed, and then kind of gliding across the globe, coming down on the other side. Pop your jet engines back on, enter the landing pattern, and land. And our goal is to be able to go again 2 hours later. So you could literally, wake up in the morning and on the West Coast, do your, have your morning meetings, hop over on a flight at lunchtime, land in the East in the morning, and then it's morning there, have meetings, and then do what you need to do and fly back and literally be home for dinner. So that's the ultimate goal for Venus. On the way, we are developing a drone that really is a risk reducer for us. And so, we know that we need to, it was, I think, the 101st flight for SpaceX before they've sent astronauts. I mean, if we're going to put humans on this, which our goal is to build a human rated vehicle that's capable of carrying about 12 passengers. So we're not talking about a really large 747. It's more private jet size, kind of Gulfstream size vehicle. And so we'll so ultimate goal is to build that plane. In terms of timeline, we hope to have the first vehicle, the Stargazer, fully developed probably by 2025, 2026. But then it's going to be a minimum 5-year flight test program. So we don't see no sooner than 2030 would these vehicles actually be, out flying passengers. So in the next year and a half, we hope to have a smaller scale drone, kind of a subscale drone that's flying, and then continue developing up to the full scale vehicle.
Amazing, incredible. And how would you guys, I guess, with other similar companies and in the sort of hypersonic field, how would you guys sort of differentiate Venus Aerospace from other sort of similar companies in the field?
Yeah, so the other companies in the space, for the most part, are using scramjets, which is a totally different type of propulsion system, and we're using rockets, and so it's a very different, really totally different platform. There's other companies like Boom doing supersonic flights, and at the end of the day, I actually believe we believe there's room for everybody in the world in terms of different flights. We might want to take a Boom flight from Houston to New York quickly, and then we would want to take a Venus flight from Los Angeles to Tokyo. Venus is not set up for short haul flights. We really need the 5,000 mile, 4,000 mile long global flight. So yeah, there's a few other groups out there working on hypersonic flight, but again, they're all using scramjets.
Amazing. And going back to what I said earlier on in the episode, again, one of the main sort of reasons for setting this up is to try and make these episodes as resourceful as possible for our listeners and people wanting to get into space, people both inside, outside, technical, non-technical. Over your career and academic years, what would you say are the best resources that you've identified and you've been able to utilize over the years, whether it be courses or programs or mentors that have sort of helped you segue into the space sector?
Again, I think my route into the space sector was, non-linear. Like I never dreamed of going into space.
Yeah.
I think, or getting in the space industry now that I'm in it, I love it. I think it's collaborative. Everybody's cheering everybody on. It's a really small industry. Like, it's fascinating in terms of, just how everybody knows everybody, I think, or you're one person connected away from somebody else in the industry. In terms of getting in, you hit on it earlier. There is room for everyone. I mean, we have accountants, we have, health and safety folks, you have communications folks, you have marketing folks. Like, so space is, you do not have to be an aerospace engineer to work in aerospace or in space. You need the communicators, you need the money folks, you need, we've got a facilities person that's, making sure our air conditioning and our lights and our internet stays on, and IT. Like, there's an incredible opportunities, in terms of what resources I've used. Honestly, I use Twitter a lot.
Yeah.
I use Twitter for news stories. I use Twitter for resources. I use Twitter to figure out, especially for fundraising and building the company, like, what are the best resources for how do we reach venture capitalists? That's a whole different topic. But I've been amazed at, some of the best minds have Twitter accounts that you can, tap in and learn from them. In terms of learning, there's so many free resources out there. There's a lot of universities are putting, their online content out for free. I think MIT has a huge, incredible, you can pretty much get a master's degree or undergrad degree from MIT with all their online courses and then take certificates, or Khan Academy. Like, I was actually trying to brush up on some math, and I dug into, I was like, I haven't done this math since, 1998.
Yeah.
So, dug into that, and all those resources are out there and they're totally free. So you can really, anything that you want to know about the industry it's out there, and there's free resources to get you there.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, thank you ever so much for going through all that. I think our final question we like to sort of close the show out with is advice. Again, it comes back to that person we've been talking about throughout the show that is kind of looking in the space sector through a lens and thinking, that's not for me, it's beyond my reach, it's not accessible. And again, this, it's technical or non-technical. What advice would you give that person, for someone who is looking to enter into the space sector in 2022 and beyond? What advice would you give them?
I mean, there are so many jobs. I mean, the space industry is growing like crazy. There's an incredible amount of jobs out there that are both remote or on site. Fortunately, there's companies all over, especially in the US, doing space stuff. So it's like, if you're interested, be diligent and, apply to those jobs, reach out to those folks on Twitter, reach out on LinkedIn. I'd say go for it. Don't be afraid to, take that leap. If space is what you're passionate about, then, there's absolutely room for you. And I think, the industry is only going to be better off with a more diverse set of folks that are joining the industry and helping push things forward. And it could be everything from policy to technology to, as I said, to business, accounting, communications. There are literally space jobs across the world, that they need incredible folks to join on those journeys.
Amazing. Excellent. Sassie, thank you so much. Thanks for today. Thank you for joining. I appreciate how busy you are. So I really, really appreciate your time today. That's it. Thank you ever so much. It's been great to speak to you. Really, really appreciate it. And wish you all the best and success with Venus, and hopefully our paths cross in the future.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, thanks, Rich. Appreciate it. And Laura told me she's like, I had an incredible outreach after being on your podcast at Laura Crabtree. So
Laura, of course, Laura, that was the connection. Yeah, of course. Yes, she that episode was amazing. It's just like this as well, like hearing her origin story, and where she came from, and like all the stuff at SpaceX. It was incredible. She's amazing. I really like Laura.
Yeah, and actually that's been one of the fun things. So I got connected with Laura through another founder, and she was like, hey, it's another female in aerospace.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about collaboration. So it's like Laura and I started talking, and then I realized I've got this friend that's in aerospace that's a founder, and I know of this person. And so like we actually created a cohort of women. We call ourselves the badass women of aerospace.
That's amazing.
And we're all founders of aerospace type companies. And most of us have raised kind of seed rounds or Series A. And we have regular calls. We have a monthly call just to talk about like challenges we're facing, whether it be hiring or fundraising issues or culture building at our companies. And it's been a really great resource for all of us. And Laura's actually become a really good friend because we're kind of running on similar journeys. We're building totally different products. We actually use Laura's company's product, Epsilon 3, here at Venus.
Oh, wow.
So
that's amazing. I absolutely love that. Yeah, we spoke to, we've had Mel Strickland on from Slingshot.
Yeah,
again.
Mel's a part of the group too.
Oh, is she?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Mel and I have a similar investor. And so we were actually at an event together and spent like 2 straight days together hanging out and just chatting business and company. And, it's a really small world. And when you're a female founder in aerospace, I think it's smaller. Yeah,
she's amazing. We had Rachel Lyons from Space for Humanity. We had Shelley on not so long ago from Space Foundation. I spoke to Stella from ISAR Aerospace a few weeks ago, and one of our first ever, I think it was like our second ever episode, was Carol Craig from Sidus Space as well. So it's been amazing.
Awesome. Well, thanks for doing this, and it's a pleasure meeting you.
And you, Sassy. Take care. I'll speak to you soon.
All right, sounds great. Thanks,
Thank
Rich.
You. Cheers. Bye.
Yes, bye.